Noach was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Noach walked with God. And Noach begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And the world had become corrupt before God, and the earth became full of robbery. And God saw the earth, and behold, it had become corrupted, for all flesh had perverted its way on earth. And God said to Noach, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth has become full of robbery because of them, and behold, I am destroying them from the earth.
If you want more and in an intimate and personal setting, together with like-minded people who seek to grow and become their truest self, click the link below in the description and join the Tanya Rabbi community, TRC.
So, of course, it's a pretty fascinating story. Those who are have the time, many of you do, come every day and learn Chumash and Rashi. And we learned this today. And it's fascinating to learn Rashi on the verse and understanding how Rashi learns out from the verse. We try to understand as best as we can within a time frame. So fascinating story, but beyond the storyline, we all know the Torah comes from the word hoirah. It's a lesson. It needs to impart a practical lesson. So what is the lesson of Noach? Now, the obvious answer would be, well, don't live an immoral life like the people did in the times of Noach, robbery and all sorts of immorality, right? Live a moral life. That's obviously very simplistic. And it's straightforward enough that, do we need the story of Noach, such a detailed story, to tell us that? And why do we need to learn from him? I mean, he was the only generation that there was, bad people and don't live that way. Okay, maybe the flood, was a flood of an entire generation or entire, universe. So that's unique. But remember, Torah's not here to tell us history, tell us stories. It's here to teach us. So couldn't we learn that from other upright, God-fearing people, what it means to live a proper life? I mean, don't we have in next week's Torah portion, Abraham, Avram Avinu, the first Jew? Wouldn't it be better to learn the story of morality from him? After all, he personifies kindness. He is, the ultimate kind individual of bestowing kindness on others. So what do we need to learn how to lead a moral life from Noach? What is he adding that we won't have in the next week and the following weeks of all of the patriarchs and matriarchs? So, and further to add to it, Noach, for all of his moral goodness, kind of, in a sense, blew it. Because his whole generation, all the people that lived then, were destroyed. So he didn't succeed. Don't we have greater success stories with Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov? So we need to understand what is so important from this story that's going to teach us how to make the proper moral choices in life and how we can inspire others that we wouldn't get otherwise if this story wasn't told. Now, for seeking a solution, for a moral society, we have law enforcement, we have judgments that incur punishments for people for doing things that harm others, whether financially, physically, mentally, emotionally. So, of course, to create a good society, we need that. But that's not the answer. So it can't be that, oh, look at the consequence of such moral decay. There comes a flood, so that's going to teach us. There has to be something more compelling that will, more compelling, and that is not just based on consequences. Be good, so you won't get punished. Yeah. Boys are at a bar mitzvah of their friend, and the father of the bar mitzvah boy put a beautiful fountain of chocolate, and he knows how 13-year-old boys can act. So he puts a sign there, take one cupful, no more. God is watching. Kids come there, kind of freaked out. So they kind of move over to the candy bar. It's a chocolate. And so one of the boys is looking and he takes one candy. He wants to take more. Looks around. Anybody looking? Takes it. He's ready to take another 2 of them. His friend says to him, don't worry. No one's looking. Even God, he's watching over the chocolate, not over the candy. Take a couple more. So we live in a world of cause and effect. You do something, there's an effect. There's a consequence. You're kind, positive consequence. You do something, you steal, you rob, you cheat, whatever it is, there's consequences. There's consequences in the court of law, there's consequences in what you do to society, and so on and so forth. And primarily that's what we have, and we see that it's not working so well. So we need something more compelling, something that will help to avoid the vicious cycle. How we can imbue, inspire, more caring, compassionate, good people in this world. So let's unfold the story. So we, the Jewish people, have a long history. A long history, as the verse tells us, levadav yishkain, a nation dwells alone. We're the bearers of the moral code, the Torah, that needs to be a light unto the nations, but we find a world that's quite often indifferent. And because of the indifference, and because we are throughout our history been subjugated to the societies that we've lived in, the fact that we have a moral duty of light unto the nations has been somewhat of a dormant feature of the Jewish people. And we dwelt more alone than anything else. But it remains true that we are tasked by the Torah to be the moral compass of the world. Now, as we all know, that doesn't mean that we proselytize others, right? I'm not looking for everybody to be Jewish, not at all. But God created all of humanity, which is clearly demonstrated in the story of Noah, that they should follow a moral code. God expects it. And he endowed us with the capability of rising above, the animalistic nature and refine ourselves and be upstanding and ethical people. And as a result, in this week's Torah portion, the seventh, the last of all the Noahide universal laws were given. 6 were given to Adam last week, and now the 7th is given. And with this, we have the basic code of humanity. As the Rambam writes in Hilchas Malachim, the Laws of Kings, 6 mitzvahs were commanded to Adam. The prohibition against worshiping false gods, cursing God, murder, incest and adultery, theft, and as well as the command to establish courts and courts of justice, establish laws and courts of justice. The prohibition against eating flesh from a living animal was added in for Noah. As the verse states in this week's parsha, nevertheless, you may not eat flesh that is with its life, which is its blood. And therefore, we have 7 Noahide laws. They're called Noahide laws after Noah, being given the 7th one. That's just a very general outline, of course. The Talmud elaborates on these laws in details. Maimonides spends 2 chapters in Mishnah Torah, something that we learned, a few months ago. And there are many contemporary codifiers of Jewish law that, bring these laws into a modern, making them relevant rather for a modern world. So, as we mentioned, that the Jewish people being a light unto the Jewish people. So that means we have the obligation to bring these teachings. The Rambam writes, God commanded Moshe to compel all people to accept the commandments given by Noah's descendants. So the Rebbe demonstrates how this is a halachic obligation. The Rebbe writes, at the very least, what emerges is a halachic obligation on every individual to do all in their power to influence the nations of the world to fulfill the 7 mitzvahs, inasmuch as this is Maimonides' recorded opinion with no dispute. It is certainly the accepted halacha. Very interesting. In other words, this is not just like a nice ethical, moral thing to do. That's what most people would understand. Yeah, you want to be an uber mensch, what you got to do? Inspire the nations of the world that they should, every individual, observe 7 Noahide laws. And that's what the Rambam is saying. It's a legal obligation. We're bound to this. It's a responsibility of every single Jew, not just those who are in a position of power, right? But any Jew, they have the legal obligation to inspire, to influence, right, non-Jewish people to keep the 7 Noahide laws. Rabbi YY Jacobson sees his obligation in his famous story of Yoina, which we read on Yom Kippur. If you see a non-Jew doing something wrong, and you're in a position to protest, you must protest, as God sent Yonah to Nineveh to inspire them to repent. Of course, initially he didn't do that. He ran away, right? He didn't want to inspire. Nineveh was a city of non-Jews. It was a prophet, not coming to the Jews to tell them to repent, but to the non-Jews, right? Chassam Sofer is a contemporary source, and he writes, there is a mitzvah to guide non-Jews, as Maimonides writes in the Laws of Kings in chapter 10. And in the Rebbe's words, it is plainly obvious that anyone with the ability to influence a non-Jew in any way to fulfill 7 mitzvahs has the obligation to do so from God's command to Moshe. Certainly, anyone with business relationships with non-Jews or the like must use the relationships to influence people. The correct way to do this is to explain, in a way that is meaningful to you, that God has given humanity 7 commandments to fill the world with justice and uprightness. Interesting. Now, our sages tell us in the Talmud that a load is according to the camel, right? In other words, you don't overload the camel with what it can't carry. That means we've been commanded as Jewish people to inspire the nations of the world, individuals. I mean, nations doesn't mean like, you have to go to the leaders. If you have influence there, fine. If you have influence there, fine. But more importantly, whoever you have influence, and we're commanded to use all the resources we have, and we'll be given the resources that we can inspire, strengthen, and guide people. So we can pull it off, right? So this brings back to the story of Noach. He tried to influence a world, but only met with apathy. He tried. The people were indifferent, uninterested. So, okay, whatever his efforts were, they didn't succeed. Yet we are obliged to make the effort. That means that we have the capacity. One man's failure doesn't mean that therefore we don't have an obligation. We do. So what is it that could make the difference in inspiring an individual? What is maybe the beginning point, the first point that we could use to inspire another individual? Any thoughts? Any thoughts, folks? What is something inspirational? One beginning point, one idea, one colossal teaching, inspiration.
Kindness.
Kindness, okay.
What we don't want that somebody does to us, that doesn't we do to him. And this is
excellent. Excellent. Anybody else? Good. Thank you, Michael. Any other thoughts?
Justice.
Justice. Well, that sounds like, crime and punishment, that, there's consequences to what we do, which is true, but is that working? So, justice working? In other words, if you're going to go into a person, that you have some kind of connection, relationship with, you're going to tell them, we got to be moral people because there's justice.
Instruction.
Okay. Rachel, I saw Rachel, you had your hand up.
Maybe by example, but also by teaching of tzedakah.
Okay, example and by tzedakah, excellent.
Compassion.
Compassion, great. Anybody else? Doing good things for and with others. Jane, okay, excellent. Anybody else? Advita?
Isn't it thou shalt not steal, because that's why the flood started, because they were stealing?
You mean that's the one teachings that we should inspire people with that will bring them to lead a moral life? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Don't steal. Okay. I hear. Liba, doing God's will. Okay. I gotta tell you, I'm not being inspired. I don't know if anybody else is. Okay.
Having connections.
Keeping an attitude of simha.
Akoy, sorry, then Tim. What'd you say, Akoy?
Keeping an attitude of simha.
Simcha, Being joyous, okay. How are you inspiring that exactly? I'm not clear. Okay. What is it that's, tell a person you got to be joyful. Telling a person you should be kind, compassionate. Is that, how is that inspiring? Like we should make banners and say, be compassionate, be kind. How is that going to be something that's going to affect the person? Tim, what do you say?
Well, I was going to say that it helps to have to be connected. I mean, in the traditional sense, it's being connected to, somebody in power, somebody with influence. But I guess to bring that home is for us to internally connect ourselves with a greater power, which is Hashem.
Okay. So connect with a greater power. Okay. So how about?
Good example.
Good example. Okay. How about when you speak to a person, you tell them, do you know how amazing and great you are? You're created in the image of God. As just as God is one and unique and singular, so are you one, unique and singular. You're awesome. That's kind of, it's going to tug at some hearts, right?
Tanya.
Right. Well, that's actually a verse in Chumash Vlast, this Shabbos Torah reading, right? It's this past Shabbos we read it, right? The Yivra Elokim is Adam b'Tzalmai, and God created the man in His image. B'Tzelem Elokim bara, say in the image of God He created him. Zochar ben Nekeva bara, male and female He created them, right? So what's important over here is, we can look at the human being. I remember I saw a long time ago a YouTube that was some chemist. What is the sum total of man? What's the sum total of man? So if you take of all of the chemical components, and this was like many years ago, so it might be a little different today. If you take the chemical components of all of that we're all made up of, so I think the value when you break it down into chemical components, we were like 23 cents. That's the value when you break it down, right? Of all the chemicals that we're made up of. Okay, so today maybe it's that was maybe 40 years ago, maybe more even, and so today maybe we're worth $1.23,
Probably.
right? And if you look at ourselves in a molecular manner, right? So then we are just a speck in the universe. We are nothing. What's man that you should remember him, right? We're a piece of dust in the universe, let alone before God. But God created us in His image, and that changes everything. It changes how I see myself. It changes how I see others. I'm not a meaningless blob, just as God is not a meaningless being. And if I'm not, and you're created in the same way, so then, that tells us something on how we could, the beginning place, and how we can inspire another person to be a truly upright, moral, and good, divine person. Because after all, you're the apple of the eye of God Almighty. And as the Mishnah actually states this, Pirkei Avos and the Ethics of Our Fathers in chapter 3, it says, Rabbi Akiva used to say, humans are cherished. This means every human being, for they are created in the image of God. As even greater sign of love, God let humanity know that they were created in his image, as it says, for the image of God, he created humanity. Others, it's one thing that, we are created in the image of God, but God gave us the awareness of it. We learned it in last week's Torah portion. We learned it in Tanya. We learned it everywhere. That God even makes us aware of it. Right? So how fortunate are we that we have that knowledge, that awareness? A dog doesn't. A swordfish doesn't. An ape doesn't. But we do. This allows us then to be dignified, to be whole, complete, and worthy. And because of that, we can then dignify others in being created in the divine image, that they're whole, complete, and worthy. And with that could be the inspiration now, to keep 7 Noachide laws for all humanity. Right? So the Taisus Yom Tov on the Ethics of the Fathers, he explains that Rabbi Akiva refers to all people. The verse he quotes as proof applies to all people, not Jews exclusively. Rabbi Akiva sought to empower all people, including non-Jews. Maimonides writes about this in the Laws of the Kings, as we mentioned before. Rabbi Akiva intended to pave a broad path for all people to achieve upstanding character, as we are commanded by Moshe to do. As explained in Maimonides, we ought to influence them with words and draw their hearts toward their Creator's will. Mention their goodness and instill in their hearts that as bearers of God's image, they are cherished and possess an internal moral compass. Therefore, he quotes the verse where God supplies his reason for commanding them, for God made humanity in his image. This verse refers to non-Jews as does Rabbi Akiva. So this then, by cherishing this notion, then gives us a way that we can now access the manual for life that will be able to inspire nations of the world, people of the world, to fulfill the 7 Noachide laws, being that they are intrinsically of value, intrinsically have dignity, and God gives that. And together with what God gives to you intrinsically, he gives you also the path that he wants you to follow. So for Jews, it's 613 commandments. And for the non-Jews, it's 7, right? So as the Rebbe continues this week's Sikha, and he says, this is what the sages mean when humans are cherished, for they were created in the image. He's informing us how a Jew must and can influence all citizens of the world to fulfill God's commandments by explaining how very precious they are, being created in the image. And as such, they must follow the Creator's will. Wow.
You mean one at a time, because they're not thinking too much about these days.
Sorry, I
guess you're meeting one person at a time, because I don't think the nations are thinking all that much today. The Jewish people, or the anti-Semitism is, things are, or I don't know how, you mean influencing one person at a time, individually.
Individually, I mean, no, I don't know, I don't think we're going to start with the anti-Semite, but why can't we start off with the people that we have? If you are involved in business, or you're involved in a work environment, and you have people that you can inspire, so if you
worth ethics, I mean, personal worth ethics you're talking about, personal, just,
Right, well, the Rambam was speaking about a personal obligation. He wasn't speaking about he wasn't speaking about a nation's obligation to go out there and flex our arm and make sure everybody's doing what they got to do. It's about a personal obligation. That's what we learned. That who we come in contact with, that we inspire them in this manner, right? So when you realize that you are cherished by your Creator, and that not for what you did, but for who you are, right? So then that's remarkable. That's beautiful. That's a beginning point. But let's dig a little deeper over here. Okay. Oh boy. Move on. What does it mean exactly? A divine image of God. Right. God doesn't have an image, doesn't have a body, right? Doesn't have form. So what is that image exactly? What does it mean? Right? In other words, we understand the consequence of the image till now. That's what we've spoken about. The consequence of the image is, well, just as God is divine, so that makes everybody divine and unique and special and precious for who they are, period. Right? That's the consequence of what this is telling us. But that's not explaining to us what's the divine image. What does that mean exactly? So the Rambam, not in Mishnah Torah, but in the Guide to Perplex and Mar Nevuchim, he explains that the divine image refers to the human capacity for intellect, or shall we call it the nefesh hasichlis, the intellectual soul. Let's see the Rambam. The image is the capacity for intellectual understanding. The words of the verse, like God's image, tell us that the intellectual soul within humanity emanated, atzula, from his Holy Spirit. Many understand the Hebrew word image to describe something as visible, tangible body. They err in this until they veer toward heresy, to believe that God is physical. No, that image refers to the inner nature of a thing, meaning that this is the idea that defines its being in essence. Therefore, our capacity for thought is called the divine image. So image is the true character quality that we've been given, right? That rightfully belongs to God. The capacity to understand, of intelligence. And this is what, again, the Tesis Yantav explains. The idea of the image, as Maimonides explains at the beginning of the guide, for the perplexed, is it refers to the intellect that is intelligible to humans, right? So that's what makes us uniquely human, is the form of intelligence that we have, not the physicality of ourselves, right? We're not just sophisticated animals, but our minds are different entirely from any other creation. So what we need to know is, before we can inspire anybody else and influence anybody else, is we need to, as I think was mentioned by someone before, that we need to be living by the code of morality. But before we can live by that code of morality, we need to have the positive self-image of who we are. Because when you have that positive self-image, then it's easier to live with that morality. Otherwise, it's just something imposed. But if you know that you are in the image of God, that you have a unique mind that other creations don't, capacity of self-awareness, right? That the mind can appreciate the truth that we're speaking right now, right? If I were to speak to this to a dog, to chimpanzee, they wouldn't get this.
Do you think Noah that actually had that concept? And if he did, he could have influenced other people more rather than just building an ark. You think he wasn't?
Let's continue with this, and we'll get there. We'll get to Noah. Right, right now we're not there. We're not by Noah yet.
Okay.
Okay. So now, getting back to the concept of creating the divine image, what it means is everything that we know as a result of created in the divine image, that we are endeared to God, have dignity because of the image, right? We are inherently good. All of those things is now we have the awareness of it. And we can understand it intellectually. So not only do we have all of that, but we have creating the image means that we have that self-awareness of that for myself, and therefore I can bestow that upon others. Right? Does that make sense? But is there a problem with that? What did we just say?
And it's like when I want to sell something, I must be convinced of it. When we have to bring Torah to the nations, and that the first argument is that you are divine and therefore you have to follow the law, then we must embed it in ourselves. When we don't have the emunah to fully believe we are godly and we are humble and we are complete and we are worthy, then we can't sell this concept to the nations.
Right? True. Anything else that's a problem over here? Again, what are we saying? We're saying created in the divine image. The divine image, therefore, the repercussion of that is, right? What's the repercussion? We're endeared, we're dignified, we're whole, we're complete, and we're worthy. Period. Right? What is the divine image actually? The awareness of that fact. That we have an intelligence that can appreciate that, understand that, fathom that, and live with that moral conduct, with that moral code. Right? Does that make sense what I'm saying? What's the problem though?
Yes.
Intellect alone hardly guarantees any moral conduct, moral behavior. Right? We saw that in the last century. Right? Social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, whether the communists or the Nazis. Intelligence itself, being aware of this, doesn't suffice. Clearly, intellect alone will not create an inspiration for everybody to follow the code and see their own self-image as they're in the divine image and therefore endeared inherently so, and just as any other human being is endeared inherently so. So what are we going to have to ensure more that could ensure, like, that's not sufficient. Am I clear in my question? Especially with, because intelligence, as much as we think we're intelligent, but the intelligence of an individual gravitates to their desires of the heart, their ego, and materialism. So your intelligence will be shaped and even warped by your own self-interest, stemming from your ego and your emotional, psychological needs. So it's not a guarantee, just because we're creating the image of God, right, that you should then appreciate, have an awareness of that, and that should be inspiring, that you should follow the moral conduct that comes together with that. Clear?
But Rabbi, at the same time, there's not a problem using our intelligence to analyze all of these things. Intelligence is not, I don't want to say a dirty word, but it's necessary. We need to use our intelligence at the same time.
No, of course. We didn't negate that it shouldn't be engaged. We're just saying that it's not sufficient. We see that those who guide their lives merely by intelligence, right? Intelligence will lead you to do that which is of self-interest. Intelligence is not pure. It is not purely objective, and it's not purely good. That's the point. We're talking about the intelligent soul, right? That's true. Not enough. So what do we need to inspire then? More than that. So intelligence is part of the human condition. It's what makes us human. Human, that we have a divine component, the image of God. But there's another divine quality that is untainted by the human condition, and that is the godly divine soul itself. Its nature, as we've learned in Tanya, if you recall, it's like a flame. It wants to attach itself to God, not because of the consequence, not because, it's like, if I tell you you're wonderful, so then you want to have a connection with me. If I tell you you're terrible, you want to have nothing to do with me, right? So the nefesh hasichlis is intelligence. So you tell it you're endeared. Oh, so okay. So I that's going to inspire me to connect to you, God, right? But I can hear other intelligent things too, and I might have an agenda. My intelligent soul may have an agenda that competes with the intelligence that is of a divine order. Because in the end, intelligence is the human component that makes us human as opposed to animals, that is of God, right? His image. But then we have a godly soul that is not part of the human condition and cannot be phased by the human condition, where the intelligent soul can. Again, intelligence, as I said. Nazis were very intelligent. Communists, socialists, Darwinists, they're intelligent. So intelligence that isn't oblige goodness. Why? Even though it's the image of God, because God didn't take away your freedom of choice. So it doesn't oblige it. But what obliges it? It's when you tap into the godly soul, it's literally a part of God, and it doesn't have, and its relationship to God is not based on intelligence. Not because it understands and appreciates. Therefore, oh, wow, I appreciate I'm dignified. I appreciate that I'm of value in and of myself. That's what I feel today, but maybe tomorrow I'm not going to feel so dignified. I'm not going to feel so whole and complete. I'm going to feel broken. And therefore, tomorrow I'm going to feel my brokenness, and I'll relate to you and your brokenness. But there is a piece in us that's actually not broken. Because as part of God, it's not broken. And it seeks constant attachment back to its source. Because the intelligent soul is still human-centered. And therefore, it's consequential. There's still some bearing of consequence. The divine, godly soul is transcendent, even of intelligence. In other words, goodness there isn't because I appreciate and aware of goodness. Goodness on that level is, I am goodness. That I appreciate goodness and something to strive towards. That's intelligence will tell me. Intelligence will tell me I need to strive to be a better person. And there's a truth to that. The godly soul isn't telling me that. The godly soul tells me, I am goodness. I am godliness. That's what I am, not what I'm striving. So, when we can inspire that, then we can truly influence our surroundings to transcend even. When you think about it, what do you mean you are that? You're working to achieve it. That's logical. That makes sense. And that's what the human intelligent soul will tell us. Being created in the image of God gives me a self-awareness that, I have dignity and I got to strive to, right? But the godly soul isn't striving, it is. It is striving because it's locked up in a body, in the animal soul, and so therefore it's imprisoned. But its nature is that it is attached, that it is bound up with its source. And the body, it's an exile. So here we're talking about the godly soul gives us a capability of transcending even the intelligence of the intellectual soul. And with this now we can understand interesting teachings. Maimonides says that when we inspire non-Jews to keep the 7 Noahide laws, they need to do it because they were commanded by Moses at Mount Sinai. Why? What if they came to it on their own intelligence? It's the right thing that God wants. Well, I have to do it because of Mount Sinai. I have to do it because of Moses. I understand that this is created in the, one second, Michael, I'm created in the image of God, and this is the appropriate right thing to do. That's why the Jewish people have to inspire the world, is because on that basis of intelligence is not why you should commit yourself. Commit yourself because of the godly spark, the godly soul that transcends intelligence. That transcends intelligence. So therefore, do it because God at Mount Sinai said this is what you got to do. Because this is your true reality. This is your true being. Not because you came to an awareness. Not because you understand you have that moral obligation and therefore you're devoted today by that moral obligation that you've come to. Because today you understand that, but tomorrow you'll have a different awareness, different understanding. But if you're doing it, because that's what God said about Sinai. That's what he told Moses. I was transcending. My understanding, appreciation, and reasoning is the basis. And therefore, the 7 Noahide laws, when we inspire, have to be, because so says the Torah. The Torah Mount Sinai. So says God. Again, the human intellectual soul will do it because of its desire, its understanding. But ultimately, as we said, if we're just basing on human intelligence, then that can lead us astray. Because there's self-interest in our human intelligence. It's not pure. And we saw that, in the pandemic, with science and pandemic, definitely taught us a lesson. Everybody has an agenda. That's why it was so difficult to navigate. Because everybody has an agenda. What's the agenda? What do you mean? It's science. It's based on science. No, it's not. That's not true at all. Anybody who believes that is a fool. It's so obvious. Not to say that there's no science there at all. I'm not saying, but there's an agenda. It's agenda driven. What does it mean? But it's intelligence. Intelligence has a bias, self-interest. So where is there no self-interest? Not the rational, intelligent soul. That's not sufficient. It's the divine soul. Oh, so, and what does that mean in practical terms? Inspiring a non-Jew in 7 Noahide laws. God said so at Sinai. Because you look at the 7 Noahide laws, they're very rational. I mean, like, who's going to have a problem? Who's going to have a problem accepting them? Who's going to have a problem? I don't have a problem accepting them, right? 613 commandments, that's a whole different kettle of fish. You got a Shabbos, you've got a Shemitah, it's a sabbatical year, you got Truma and Myss, you got a lot of things. You got to give a free loan, a lot of things that you got to transcend. Human intelligence. Okay, so God gave us the capacity for that. But for the non-Jew to keep, does he have to hey, how many people are going to argue that you shouldn't murder and incest and you shouldn't steal and courts of laws and justice and not be cruel to animals? Like, there's nothing of the 7 there that, don't blaspheme God and, don't serve idolatry. Again, too much arguments. It's pretty rational. No, not sufficient. Set him Mount Sinai. That's why. That's what God wants. Again, rationally, you should also appreciate, like Menachem Hillel, you mentioned earlier. Yes, doesn't mean exclude your rationality. Understand rationally why you should, 100%, and then rise beyond that. Commit yourself. Why? Because there's transcendent of the human condition, even the divine image of our intelligent soul. So, and the Jewish people have to inspire that. Being they're the embodiment of it, they have to inspire that for all humanity. Is that clear? Beautiful thought. At least I enjoyed it.
So that's by Moses, or God through Moses.
Yeah.
But what we're saying, the Noahide laws, wouldn't that be by Noah?
That would be rational then.
Okay.
That would be rational.
I got you.
And it was given at Sinai. So here's the thing, and here's the combination, of why it's coming through. Thank you, Tim, for the question. Excellent. So here's the thing. This is why it has to come through Noah. It has to come through the rational soul, right? And as all of the laws are rational, the 7 Noahide laws, right? So the story is told to us, from Noah, who embodies that. But at the same time, the command that we're given to inspire others, and that how a proper way to fulfill it is not because it was given to Noah in a rational manner, but it was given again where? So the mitzvah was already given then, right? But it's in the Torah. Well, why is it in the Torah if it's for 7 Noahide laws for non-Jewish people? Why is it there? Because now they're given the capacity to rise beyond the rational soul, the intellectual soul, the divine image, and to do it in a transcendent manner as God says so. So that's something that was added. So first it's from Noah, and then it becomes part of the Torah. And part of what we're incumbent as Jews to inspire others. Right, so it's part of the Torah because the Torah is speaking to the Jewish people and what their obligation is. But it's in that sense, it's also then teaching us of now how the non-Jew climbs to a higher place, a greater capacity than they had before the Torah was given. That they can transcend the rational soul of just merely doing it because it makes perfect sense for them. That makes sense? Oh, thank you for that. That tied it all in. All right. Folks, amazing. You're amazing.
Does the non-Jew have a godly soul?
The way in Tanya that expresses, not in that manner, but in a different, in a manner that they can also transcend. There's a transcendence. Remember, Tanya is really speaking, speaking to the Jew. There are many lessons there for non-Jews, and much of it, right? So it's not in the same manner. It's not in the same manner. And we've spoken about this in other classes. I right now I can't really.
I'm just asking because our animalistic soul is affected by our godly soul. So, and when you try to influence somebody through, are we a little higher because our animalistic soul is a little higher in some means affected by the godly soul when you try to influence a non-Jew?
So, well, that's why we are the light unto the nations, because as that's the consequence of that, right? And that's why we have the moral responsibility, is because we embody that moral compass because of that divine soul that inspires. Yes, absolutely. But the distinction in that is, so Tanya is speaking about it, and but there is. As the Rebbe explains, as non-Jews can have the transcendence that we're talking about, but it's in a different, it's in a different manner, the transcendence. But they have that capacity of transcendence, as we just explained here. But more of that another time, because we've run out of time. Good question. All right, folks.
Jane has a question, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
Jane Bautista has a question in the chat.
Oh, go ahead. What is it?
To be inspired, we need to constantly study Torah and be connected to it. Is this right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. We need to. Yep. All right. Anything else, folks? PRC is coming up in just 20 minutes. All right. Thank you all. Bless you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.